So, about this month's reading. Hey folks, my name is Jen, and I'd like to tell you today about what I read in the month of November. Due to holiday stuff, writing projects, and a load of anxiety that could only really be quieted by playing Stardew Valley a lot, I only read 5 books this month, and only 2 of them were on my monthly TBR. Oops. The first 2 books I read were actually in the same series and by the same author. These were Naked in Death and Glory in Death. Both of these are by J.D. Robb, aka Nora Roberts. So these books are 1 and 2 in the In Death series, which follows Lieutenant Eve Dallas of the NYPSD in the 21st century, roughly around 2058. She solves murder cases, oftentimes involving serial killers. Over the series, she encounters a mysterious rich businessman with a dreamy Irish accent named Rourke, and also deals with her past demons, which namely involve an abusive childhood that she would rather forget. Naked in Death follows an asshole serial killer who is murdering sex workers, and Glory in Death deals with an asshole serial killer killing highly successful, powerful women. Both books had some of the same issues for me, but also their own separate ones kind of as well. Naked in Death used terminology for sex workers that I found off-putting. I know that I am looking at this as a person in 2020, and this book was written in like 1995, but I felt that continuously using horror to describe murder victims was very upsetting. Sex workers are people too, and they deserve respect and dignity as a murder victim rather than just being treated that way. This is often, I know, a problem in real life as well, with them being commonly overlooked as victims or having their deaths be viewed as some kind of sick fate due to their professions, and that's a very real problem. So it was not really great to have these words used by Lieutenant Dallas, who supposedly felt sympathy for the victims. So that was a major issue for book 1. Both books did have an interesting take on what they think future would be like. There saw a lot of loss of natural resources, considering how certain natural items are more expensive, like actual real coffee made from actual real coffee beans. Also, there's a lot of advancements like technology, like androids and space travel and etc. So it was cool, but also looking at it again in 2020, it all seems damn near impossible. I guess maybe this was a fair guess in the 90s, maybe, as to what life might be like. But looking at it now, it's almost like looking at Back to the Future 2. You know, when they go to 2015, there's like flying cars and everybody's wearing like 80s fashion, but like really fucked up 80s fashion. Um, or what the 80s thought fashion was gonna look like. Just wow. Um, you know, it's interesting, but overall pretty fantastical to have such a leap in technology in like 20, 30 years. Just crazy. Eve, though, was a badass, and I did enjoy her character for the most part. Rourke was an intriguing character as well at first. However, I didn't really enjoy their relationship, and that was another problem with both books, especially in the second book. He was very possessive. He was constantly pushing her buttons, shoving her out of her comfort zone, which I mean, sometimes you need to be shoved out of your comfort zone, but not as much as he was attempting to do it, and also at the same time disregarding her insistence on keeping distance between them because she's a professional. He was also extremely manipulative and demanding, especially in Glory and Death, um, being very demanding on someone who had been clearly showing she was fine with things being loosey goosey between them and not at all serious. And suddenly he's like asking her to move in and being an asshole when she's like, "Are you kidding?" Like, I didn't fucking enjoy that whatsoever. The second book had a much more interesting serial killer. But I will say both bad guys are a giant bag of dicks. Still, like I said, there's issues with pushy men again. There were instances also of sexual assault, child abuse, and incestual child sexual abuse, um, as well as things involving the murders that were troubling. Um, that was talked about in both of the books, just so you are aware in case you did want to read this series at all. But overall, these were fairly disappointing. I know that I said when I reviewed Time and Again for last month, I know that I said I was going to stop reading anything she wrote from like before 2000, but I ended up breaking it for this series, because I thought maybe this would turn out better. I've read a book that comes later on in the series called Reunion in Death, and I really enjoyed that one. So that's kind of the caliber that I was looking for here, and unfortunately not quite finding it. I have been lent two more recent ones, Fantasy and Death and Leverage and Death. I think they came out in the last couple of years or so. But as I've also said before, I can read stuff out of order, but I really prefer not to because I'll just get really confused as to what's happened. So I try to read things in the order they are meant to be. So I have been hoping that I could just read a bunch of ebooks of the past volumes, of which there are many, and kind of catch up to the ones that I physically have copies of. But looking at these, and I will say I started the third book, Immortal in Death, and I DNF'd it. About 4 or 5 chapters in. Kind of intending to come back to it, but not really sure if I would. So I don't know. That's kind of where I am with that. I honestly should probably just suck it up, look at summaries of the past books, and just read the 2 new ones and hope that they're way better because they're written more recently. I don't know. Anyway, Naked in Death gets 2 stars, and Glory in Death gets 3 stars. And the next book that I read was Greek Myths. Meet the heroes and heroines, monsters and gods of ancient Greece. This is by Jean Menzies and illustrated by Katie Ponder. As it says, this covers many of the myths of ancient Greece. I have heard a few different versions of these tales before, but I really enjoy these interpretations. They made the stories very digestible for a younger audience while also not sugarcoating some characters, namely there's crap behavior. The artwork is just gorgeous. I will show you some of it. I mean, just the cover is beautiful. The artwork is gorgeous. It's got these personal pages of the gods. There's Hades and Dionysus. It's one of my favorites actually. Eros and Psyche. The artwork is just gorgeous in there. Really love that. Yeah, it's really beautiful. I really liked the style of it. There's also facts in here about ancient Greek life and their beliefs, as well as how it's influenced parts of our modern life. For example, there's a section on how they worship the gods, like different things that they did. There's this one section here that talks about like the Olympic Games, which is only one of the games that were held. They had a lot of them actually, which I did not know before. And then also like For example, our planets are named after the Roman versions of the gods and goddesses. Yes, goddesses, because Venus is Aphrodite. Yes. Um, and various plants and animals that take their names from myths and monsters and whatnot. That was just really fascinating as well. I loved the addition of that. And I already really liked watching Jean's videos here on BookTube and hearing her discussions on mythology, all stated in her delightful accent. So I was very happy to find this book to be also enjoyable, and I honestly can't wait to share it with my future kids one day. I ended up giving this 5 stars. Next, I read The Lost Causes of Bleak Creek by Rhett McLaughlin and Link Neal. This is set in Bleak Creek, North Carolina in 1992 and follows best friends Leaf, Rex, and Alicia, Alicia. I'm sorry, I have seen this and I've heard it pronounced in so many different ways. So I'm gonna say maybe Alicia. Okay. As Anyway, this follows the three friends as they ready to enter their freshman year in high school. But a little while before then, something goes wrong with their filming of a horror flick that they are trying to do. And Alicia is sent to Whitewood, which is a reform school at the edge of town, which all the children in Bleak Creek are really afraid of. It supposedly helps straighten you out, but everyone who comes back from a stint there is almost like a shell of their former selves. So, really, what is the darkness behind this school? And that permeates their sleepy little southern town. This book was a journey. It started out in a particular way, kind of more like a mystery with a little bit of a horror tinge to it. And with about a third of the book left or so, it took just a sharp left turn into crazy. And I mean, it was definitely unexpected and interesting, but honestly, when it took that left turn, it also threw me out of the story for a little bit because I actually put the book down, ended up coming back to it later because I wasn't sure what the hell had just happened. Because it was so unexpected, and the elements of it didn't really seem to fit with the story that had been set up so far. Um, I don't know. It just really threw me for a loop. I honestly would have been pretty content with them just sticking to where they were leaning initially, with the town being full of corrupt people, but how things really went, I mean, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil this for anyone in case you really want to read it. But I will just say something unexpected happens, and I don't know how I feel about it still. I'm not sure. Other issues I had with this have to do with the ending and the audience. With the ending, I was kind of left um, unsatisfied. If this was meant to be a standalone novel, I did not find this conclusion to be very satisfying. I suppose the argument could be made that it's more true to a true to life ending, in some sense, but I also found it deeply frustrating. So I really hope that there will be a sequel to this, but so far I haven't really heard anything about them intending to write a sequel, so I'm not honestly really sure what's going on with that. So this is going to be on one of my uh, probably my disappointing list for this year, just because of the ending and everything. The audience for this book is honestly also a little confusing. I know that this was technically geared towards young adults. I think parts of this do work as YA. However, the voices of the character kind of switch between being YA and middle grade. Um, some sections especially seem to be more middle grade. I'm not sure if Rhett and Link thought that because it's about like 14, 15-year-olds, that they had to stick with YA as a genre. because that's just not true. I mean, you can have an adult book, for example, The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, which Stephen King wrote, and I believe is about, I think the little girl is like 9 years old. Um, or you can have a middle grade and have your character be 15 or 16 or even older. I mean, you look at Nancy Drew. I think those are technically middle grade, and Nancy's like 18 or 19. So really, I mean, you can have middle grade with older characters. I mean, if they wanted to shift it to that, they probably have to change a couple of details. The point of me saying all of this is I'm not really sure if this was leaning towards the correct audience or not. It's a little confusing. Things I did like about the book though, I really liked the 1992 references, even though I was a itty bitty at the time and would have no memory of some of the things mentioned at all. I do very vaguely remember life before loads of today's technology. So that was, you know, absence of cell phones and whatnot. But um, I also appreciated that the characters were named Rex and Leaf. Like, really, guys? I see what you did there. There were elements that they pulled from their real lives and their friendship details, like their river and bonds and stuff that they did with each other that I remember from like their special that they did on YouTube and also like their mythical book and everything. So those bits of it were really cool to see. You know, you write what you know. It did get a little cheesy at a couple parts, um, but I mean, I was a kid in the '90s, and trust me, a lot of that decade was cheesy. I could hear Rhett and Link's voices in a lot of this, which was nice. I also really liked that they try to tackle what a shit place small towns can be sometimes with the prejudices and judgments and corruption and people who think they're pillars of the community. Those pillars are sometimes really rotten at the foundation. I am not from North Carolina, so I can't fully confirm the zealotry in southern small towns with two Baptist churches and a whole lot of self righteousness. But I did grow up in a small town, and I've dealt enough with people who think that their God's the only one and they're the best at serving Him. So, in part, I think they hit the nail on the head with showing the ugliness under the polished turd of a rural community. On the other hand, I'm also cynical as hell. So this book did freak me out at a couple of points, which I enjoyed. But the kind of issues with it, with like I said, the ending and the unexpected part, like it took my rating down a bit. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. And the last book that I read this month was The Son of Neptune by Rick Riordan. This is, of course, book 2 in the Heroes of Olympus series. I don't want to say too much about like the plot and whatnot, as this is the second book in a series, but just in case anyone hasn't read it yet. But this one introduced a new cast of characters as well as Camp Jupiter. And we also see Percy and a couple familiar faces again along the way. So this book, I overall did enjoy it. It was great to see Percy again. Saw Nico, which is great. I really enjoyed the introduction of both Hazel and Frank. I found them to both be pretty badass and fascinating. The jokes and banter between everyone was delightful. The action was very exciting. I enjoyed the quest, of course. I do have to say there was a bit of Deus Ex Machina in here, but these books do kind of have Deus Ex Machina, and you know, there's plenty of that in mythology, so it's not really a big problem. If the myths had it, why can't a series based around them use it as well, really? Camp Jupiter was, and like everything involving that was like my least favorite parts of this book. The structure, the conformity, the rules and regulations, the focus on the best for Rome and all that bullshit. I frankly hate it. I personally have a problem with authority, but I mean, when rules and regulations make sense, that's fine. Um, when you mess up or speak out of turn or are late for muster or whatever, and you get severe punishments or potentially death, depending on the oops that you've made. Oh, hell no. I'd burn that shit to the fucking ground. Like, absolutely not. I mean, the argument could be made that that is possibly what makes it possible for New Rome to exist and to have people be um, having the ability to have families and generations, demigod descendants and whatnot. But honestly, I prefer the Greeks. I prefer crazy individual fighting and randomness and a ragtag group of underdogs. I am a huge sucker for underdogs. So Romans are just too stiff and have no fucking sense of humor, except for apparently Hazel and Frank. So I'm sorry to anyone who's fully like Camp Jupiter, hell yeah. Because I hate your damn camp. Um, Give me Camp Half-Blood any day. Guys, though, I thoroughly enjoyed this. One more note, Octavian is a bag of dicks. That's all. I gave this 4 stars. That is it. It wasn't as great of a reading month as I'd hoped it would be back on like November 1st, but it's fine. So for the holiday season, I'm going to include various charities in the description box below with the usual helpful links. Please look into them further if you are able, if you would. One of them, as mentioned, is Toys for Tots, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. They are organized by the U.S. Marine Corps. They gather and distribute toys and things for children whose families are unable to purchase gifts for the holidays. I've also linked One Simple Wish, which is an agency that partners up with their community partner network. And with the help of caring people around the world, they try to grant wishes for kids in foster care and who have been impacted by abuse and neglect. These wishes range from toys to new clothes to electronics for school or items for a first apartment. Um, Please also see what you can do to help those in your community. I know this year has been really rough, um, and not everybody is able to help, but if you can do anything to bring joy or relief to the people around you, um, please do so. It's most definitely felt a lot more, I think, at this time of the year when things are supposed to be like happy. If you know of any other reputable charities or organizations out there as well, please let me know. But I hope you are all having a good month so far, even if it might not be as festive as we all would have hoped. But I hope you're all hanging in there. Good luck with your reading. I'll see you next time.